Well, greetings, everyone. My name is Eugene Dean. Welcome to Beyond the Pandemic Community Conversations. Today, we're very pleased to have Keitha Lowe as our guest. Greetings, Keitha, and welcome.
Greetings, Eugene. Such a pleasure to be in the same space and time with you. We've shared some spaces and time over the years. It's been a while, so it's nice to be in your company again.
Yes, give thanks, and the feeling's definitely mutual. So, Keitha, we invited you on the show today just so you can share about a bit about your experience. This show has been about bringing people in the community to talk about the community or the social impact of the pandemic. You know, our first series was all about health. We had health professionals and things of that nature talking about the health impacts, but the community impact has been real. And so we wanted you to have the opportunities to share with our audience what your experience has been with the pandemic. So tell us a little bit about what your experience was from the start.
Thank you. I think, like most Bermudians and most world citizens, the first thing that struck us was fear, primarily due to lack of education, lack of exposure and experience in our lifetime with such a pandemic. I recall sitting, in my living room the first couple of weeks and wondering what it would look like beyond my gates, once I emerged from the stay in place. Um, of course, we watched a lot of TV. We heard a lot of different perspectives. Most of them, I believe, uneducated and unexperienced as well. And my perception was that we were going to have to just ride this out together, not just as a community here in Bermuda, but as a part of the world community. And no one knew what was on the horizon. So I would say that fear was my initial reaction and response. The first thing that we think about when we're hit with such a travesty in our community is our families. That's the first place that we go to. We worry about how we're going to get our children through this, our spouses, our companions, our extended family members. And then, of course, we become concerned about our friends. The first reaction is, are we going to emerge from this alive? Not emerge from this rich, nor poor, owners of property or not, positioned in a high level position or not. Our first reaction, certainly my reaction, was, are we going to, emerge from this intact in terms of our health, our well-being, and our lives? And, in our conversations, Jeannie, I think we all want fundamentally the same thing. So whatever I was experiencing in my family, I also wanted the best for the next family, regardless of race, creed, gender, age, color, or preferences, if I can put it that way. I mentioned to you yesterday that, in such a situation, you also think about unity. What can we do as a community to emerge from this intact? And so, in my mindset, we put our differences aside, we focus on our common grounds, and we find solutions to progress forward, regardless of, like I said, race, creed, color, age, and otherwise. Beyond that, I'm now faced with, let's look at some of the other issues. For the better part, our community has survived. Unfortunately, we've lost, I feel, too many people along the way. I do believe that there could have been an earlier intervention in terms of our borders. And at the same time, it could have been worse. And so we now have to take what we have and determine what are our best steps moving forward. Do I feel that we've gotten everything right? Do I feel that we've gotten our government have gotten everything right? Absolutely not. Do I believe that we have had time to do some things better? Do I believe that we have had time to do several things better? Absolutely so. But it cannot be done in isolation, and it cannot be done through polarization. This is something that we're in together. We stepped into it together. We have to get through it together, and it has to be a cohesive progression forward. I believe in my heart that when you're faced with travesties such as this in a community, that there's no room for arrogance, there's no room for overpowering and overshadowing. I believe that the people and the government must become one. We put you there, we elected you there, we hired you to carry out a task and a job. Yes, we expect for you to lead, but we also expect for you to listen. And so that's where I'm at now. We've had a couple of shutdowns, lockdowns stay in place, numerous emergency orders, or emergency power orders. And for the better part, as businesses, we've had to float through this kind of aimlessly. Employees have had to float through much of this aimlessly, not knowing what's on the other side. Individuals have lost hours, lost jobs, lost assets, and very much have had to rely not necessarily on what you need, but what you're offered. And I believe that it is one thing to find yourself in that position, but it's another thing for those who we have put in place to govern and overlook our well-being, to commune with us so that you're not just telling us what to do, but you're hearing what our position is, and also listening to some of the solutions that we ourselves may have to offer. There's a lot of expertise in experience, not necessarily in a degree, not necessarily in an accreditation. There's a lot of expertise in experience. Those who are going through what they are going through often have some very valid answers to how we can resolve some of the challenges that we are experiencing. And for now, here and now, I don't think enough of that's been done. It's one thing to hold press conferences and say, this is our position. How much is being done right now to allow people a voice that our administration can listen to and incorporate in some of the decision making that's being done?
Well, that's a very good point, Keitha. And you mentioned about being able to listen and having a forum for people to express their concerns. And yes, that has been a concern in the community, that the press conferences haven't really served that purpose.
No.
So I'll talk about, let's bring up one of the kind of hot topics that's been, talked about extensively within the community. I understand that you just returned to the island recently. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what was your experience in the mandatory hotel quarantine?
Well, let me begin with what my experience was prior to my return to Bermuda. Okay. Now, Eugene, I've traveled throughout the world in my younger years. In my more mature years, travel over extensive periods of time is not something that I welcome. I believe the community at large are familiar with the journeys / nightmare that my family and I have just come through regarding the loss of my daughter-in-law and the challenge that we had to face to find justice for her here in Bermuda. That left me on pause for approximately 8 years. I either was not able to travel or chose not to travel because I have had a much greater responsibility to attend to. that pretty much
Mhm.
consumed me. However, there's now come a time when it was required for me to travel to a whole place as the UK. That's 6 hours in the air one way and 7 hours in the air another way in terms of return.
Mhm.
Not something that I was looking forward to. But what was more concerning to me was not how many hours I was in the air, but if I would travel through the air safely,
Mhm.
arriving in the UK COVID free, as I had left Bermuda, managing my way through one of the jurisdictions that has been a number one hotspot over the course of the last year and a half, and then some. Um, what would the process of quarantine be like there? How would I navigate that? In a community that, quite frankly, I had never spent any time in. And so safety became the greater issue to me upon arrival. What I can say is that in England, I was received in a very humane fashion. Um, I was able to navigate my way to our Airbnb, where I had to reside in place for 10 days. While I was there, I can tell you that the NHS, which is the National Health System, remained in touch with me every day. A, to make sure that I was safe and sound. B, to find out if I needed any help or any resources. And C, of course, to make sure that I had honored my agreement as a visitor to their country to remain in place.
Mhm.
I was able to, over the course of several weeks, move about and take care of the business that I had arrived there to attend. But now comes the process of returning back to Bermuda.
Mhm.
And that's where the story begins to take another turn. So, of course, we had to get our PCR test, my grandson and I, which cost us approximately $450. Um, then we made our way to the airport. Quite frankly, I almost had a change of heart as to whether I should travel that day or possibly the next day. And so I didn't fill out my TA forms until approximately 6:40 in the morning.
Mhm.
Um, I received my receipt, but of course there would not have been enough time for the administration here to return my TA approval prior to arriving at the airport. And so I was prepared to proceed in good faith. And what I found upon arrival is that um, I had my form. My grandson did not have his independent form. And all that I was really able to provide to them was the receipt as evidence, that I had at least taken that step. Um, they allowed me to go through solely on a receipt, not on the actual approval. And
Right.
so the good thing is that I didn't get stuck and I was able to board. We were able to board and make our way into Bermuda. And of course, here again, we go with the fear factor because you find yourself enclosed, in a travel vehicle for the next 7 hours, not knowing who is COVID positive, who's not COVID positive. All that you know is what your own status is. That's a huge step of faith that you have to step out on. It really
Right.
is. And of course, having my grandson with me, although surely I care about myself, I care about him a heck of a lot more. And
Mhm.
I'm just like, Father, just land us safely. I arrived in Bermuda, and I have to tell you that um, in the airport, um, I was received in a very warm fashion. The young ladies there primarily were welcoming, they were understanding, and they assisted me in any additional work that needed to be done. But here we are having to fill out a second form for Khalil. I was completely cooperative, but questioning if we're traveling together. We've had our PCR test together. Why are we filling out separate TA forms? Particularly if the outcome is that we also have to quarantine together. To me, I just did not really see a whole lot of logic in that, systematically or otherwise. It just didn't make
Mhm.
any sense. And
Right.
so I still have my concerns about that. At a time when our community are struggling economically, yeah, when many people do not have employment or don't know how much longer their employment is going to last, when people are having to choose between lights and medicine, um, licensing your car or having to pay tuition. These are real things, and I can go on and on and on about that. But for anyone who may be listening in, you know what your challenges are. And you know that most of us, I'm not going to leave myself out of the equation, are having to make decisions not based on what we have, but based on what we have left, right?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Because this pandemic has not been selective. It's hit everyone across the field. It didn't come down and stop. It came down and then it spread across far and wide. So it has not been selective. And so in any case, in terms of when we look at logistics, and we certainly applaud the government in 2019 for understanding that some sort of relief would be needed. And therefore, there had to be payouts through our financial system, our social system, etc. Um, this thing has taken such a severe toll that administrative decisions that continue to be made have to be economically prudent. So, what happens to the mother who traveled a week after I had arrived, and would also be entering, her shelter in place or her quarantine? She was traveling with, I believe, 6 children. So there would be 6 children, the mother, a gainfully employed family, and so they were able to afford to make a much overdue trip. But imagine what that was for them to take those PCR tests. Just do the numbers. Just do the numbers. In the UK, a PCR test run at approximately 189. I'm not sure how much they run for in the US, which is where she was traveling from, but that's 7 bodies that have to be PCR tested. That's 7 tickets that have to be purchased. Then you have to find a quarantine place or space that can accommodate not one room, but 2 rooms. Do the numbers. And so you have a hardworking family who, at the end of the day, as a result of the travel regulations and restrictions, found themselves having to pay out close to between $8,000 to $9,000.
So just to interject there, Keitha. So in this situation, that family was left to actually pay for their hotel stay?
Yeah, yes. There was a twist that came that allowed them to shift from the hotel, which had already been deposited on, and instead be able to quarantine at home.
Okay,
But
so they were able to negotiate that?
they were able to get that suspended because of a wellness issue that had come up. So thank
Mm,
God for that. But imagine the timing. This was just, approximately 2 weeks ago. We have school just around the corner. Our children are now preparing to return to school. There are uniforms. In some cases, there are tuition. There's all sorts of preparation for supply, etc. How are we processing this stuff from an economic um, logistic position in terms of families?
right,
You
right,
don't you
right.
don't give out money on one hand because the pot has run dry in a home or several homes, and then put heavy pressure on the other side to persuade people to become vaccinated or else. That's just not the most humane approach to take.
Mm-hmm.
We are a community that have a right to opinion and a right to decisions that first and foremost affect our personal well-being with regards to our health. I don't believe that we should be uh, generating and creating narratives and polarizations that create separations. What we should be doing is generating conversation and solutions that allow us to exist in our community together, regardless of what choice we make in terms of becoming vaccinated or not vaccinated. It's a personal choice. It should not be a judgment. And I believe that in our community, because of how the narrative has continued, all that is being generated is division and polarization and distance. We're a small community. We cannot survive under those conditions and those terms.
Right.
We have to educate, we have to inform, we have to exchange to make sure that we find, that we discover, that we create, that we put together a plan that works best for a community of our size and nature. Bermuda is not the typical community.
Right.
We cannot continue to pull and tug and to further polarize to a level that we now have four Bermudas, not two. We already have two Bermudas and
Right.
possibly three on any given day, right? We cannot afford to take that and split it
Even
a
further.
second. We cannot.
Yeah.
We cannot.
So if this is something that I've heard a lot in the community is like from all our collective experience,
Mhm.
uh, hundreds of years, we've evolved to a place where you know we're recognizing the need to respect the differences that we have.
Yes. Hmm.
And so after watching us come so far as it relates to race, as it relates
Yes.
to gender, as it
Yeah.
relates to religion, culture, even sexual orientation,
Hmm.
finding ourselves in a position where we're reverting back to repeating the same mistakes is something that has a lot of people puzzled. So we're trying to
Hmm.
figure like, okay, so why are we doing something that we have already acknowledged has been problematic all throughout history?
Hmm.
And we put so much effort to find a resolve for these things, and why are we in a position now where we're perpetuating it again? And the mandatory hotel quarantine is something that really brought that up.
Oh, yes.
There was division, and then when that came up, it like, okay, so now this is just like clear punishment. Like you're literally punishing people. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Financially, emotionally. So let's shift it. Tell us a bit about what your experience was like, because I know you had some unique situations.
I sure did.
With your experience in the hotel quarantine. Yeah.
I sure did. I had a personal review that led me to understand I could actually quarantine at home, and it had to do with the time frame in which I had booked and traveled that would allow me to quarantine at home. Um, and I tried to reach out several times via phone and otherwise to have the answer that I needed delivered in time, and it just never came. And so I had to raise it again when I arrived in the island, and proceeded with another exemption request at the airport. Uh, the staff there, who again I emphasize were nothing less than lovely, had said, listen, would you please be willing to cooperate with us and quarantine for 24 to 48 hours while we get this sorted out? And I felt at that point, I would, do exactly that. I would go into quarantine for the next 24 to 48 hours. and hopefully receive an update that I would be able to return to our home and simply quarantine here, which is where I'm at right now. Um, well, that call never came up. Came.
So
Yeah.
okay, I'm sorry. Hold on. So are you saying that you came in, you had started requesting information about your grants for an exemption,
Yes.
right? You weren't getting the answers.
Mhm.
You got on the island, you addressed it again. You were
Yes.
then asked to go into hotel quarantine for 24 to 48
48
hours
hours while it was
while
sorted
more
out.
discussion was had around it.
Hmm.
And then now you're saying that no one ever followed up with you.
No,
So you ended up staying in hotel quarantine for how
for
long?
2 weeks. For 14 days, for 2 weeks.
And there was absolutely no follow up.
None. Absolutely
Wow.
none. Um, I was also trying to imagine what it would be like to contain a 8-year-old inside of 4 walls with approximately, an hour outing per day, 2 hours at the most, right? What does that do to a child's psyche? You know, that's a lot of energy to contain that long. So indeed, the way that our property is set up, it would have made far more sense, not just for me, but even the other quarantiners that I would have been amongst. For Lord forbid, if I'm carrying something, if I'm incubating the virus, then I'm amongst individuals who I can equally, you know, affect, who I can equally infect, because we're in quarantine, but you're not specifically in quarantine alone if you're sitting in a hotel. Those, if you're breathing in and you're breathing out, whatever you breathe out, the next person is also breathing in. You understand?
Mhm.
So I would be safer to both myself as well as to fellow quarantiners if I'm able to quarantine at home. I think that it's also important to review a person's history in terms of how they've handled themselves. And it's not a long history. Take a look at how many times we've actually taken the responsibility to get ourselves tested and what is the result of those tests. To date, I've now been tested, I believe, 7 times, and every last one of my tests have been negative. Will it always remain that way? To be seen. But what that is an indication of is that you're dealing with an individual who is, staying within the call of duty, um, by our government and our administration's request to do my utmost, not to be a risk to this community. 7 of my tests have all come back negative. And so when our government requests us stay in place, the very best is done to honor that. When I'm asked to only attend the grocery store on my specific day, I honor that. When I am asked not to mingle, I honor that. So um, you can take a look at, individuals' patterns in terms of, are they being responsible about being tested, particularly if not vaccinated? How often and what are the results? And that'll give the administrators some sense of what type of individual they're dealing with, what type of patterns that individual has, and if they're dealing with someone who indeed is trying to work with the government and work with my community to make sure that I do my part. And many will say it's not that cut and dry, and I would not argue, but I do think that one of the best places to begin when you are assessing individuals inside of a pandemic, you have to look at their patterns and you have to look at their results. If not, what is the point of offering tests and analyzing the results of those tests? You're talking about now a year and close to a half where my pattern has been the same, whether I'm now traveling or whether I'm not traveling.
I see. So, so there's no follow up. You end up just being in the hotel for 2 weeks, and you say that the way you were handled at the airport, you were handled very respectfully. Uh,
Yes, I believe that the team that was on the front line, I feel that they were courteous. I feel that they were respectful. And I also believe that they were understanding, which is such the Bermudian nature, right?
mhm.
This is how we typically are as individuals. At the same time, here I am cooperating, um, and I understand that I'm being sent to Southampton Princess
Okay. All right.
with, with an 8-year-old.
Right.
I I am trying to understand why I would cross approximately 4 or 5 different hotels to be sent to Southampton Princess, but it's only going to be for 1 to 2 days, and so I will cooperate.
Right. Okay. Because you're thinking 1 to 2 days.
1 to 2 days. These people are tired. I don't need to be an aggravation to them. Cooperate. And also appreciate the fact that they're willing to place me accordingly. However, um, when I get there, I find myself um, in an environment that we know by now because it's been made public um, is not the best health condition for anyone, and
Mhm.
certainly not an 8-year-old little boy.
Right. Right. Right.
Certainly not an 8-year-old little boy.
So that was the situation with the mood at the restaurant. I mean, I'm saying at the restaurant. I'm sorry, at the hotel,
At the hotel
which I guess
throughout.
was to be expected because the hotel had already been closed for a very long time, which kind of brings to question why it was even included in
It's
the hotel quarantine. Were you told that the other locations were full?
I wasn't told anything at all. I was just told that that's where we were being sent. And
Right.
so you leave room for some trust. I trust that I will be put in an environment that is considered safe because that's what this whole topic is about, safety, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't expect to be put in a situation that is more riskier than the situation that I'm already trying to avoid.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
if I can ask you, Jean, to probably go to your screen, I just need to do an attachment here.
Right.
So if you
Right.
can just go to your screen for a minute,
Okay. No problem.
okay, give me half a minute.
Yeah. And just thinking about your story, the other thing that's interesting is that you were able to come on the island without having pre-booked any hotel stay. And once you got on the island, then the government then booked a hotel for you. So I'm not sure if people are totally aware of that,
Right,
because people were told that they had to book their hotel prior to coming, and many persons are under the impression that if they fail to do that, then they'll be unable to return home, to the country. So
right.
you weren't alone in traveling, going to Fremont, Southampton. How many other people were going to Fremont, Southampton with you?
There were 9 of us all together, I believe.
So there were 9 of you
Approximately
all
9
together.
of us all together.
Hmm. Right. And so your understanding
Exactly.
is that all of them were in the same situation as you as it relates to payment. So your
Oh yeah,
hotel stay
definitely.
was
Everybody,
being covered by the government, and hotel
definitely.
was the case for
Everybody
the others.
was.
Okay, see,
Yeah,
and see how you're saying that? Most
yeah.
people, if you tell them that, they'll be like, "Oh, hold on, what are you saying that the government paid?"
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, the government covers the cost.
Right.
The government covered the cost. And, I just think that if that option is there, be transparent about it, because it's not going to be an issue of people taking advantage of it or even taking it for granted. Because the truth is, right now, people are not traveling because they want to, people are traveling because they have to.
Mm,
In my case, I had a family emergency. I
right.
don't want to travel. I have to travel.
Yes. Yeah. And a lot of times, and so it's causing a lot of stress because people have things that they need to take care of. And because of their understanding of the situation, they're
Right.
feeling that they're unable to do it. And so I don't know how many people have not traveled as a result of their understanding of the situation. But it's
Exactly.
definitely a shock to many, and probably still is a shock to people now. But recently, it was released in the paper that the government has actually spent, you know, in around $250,000, so about $250,000 covering hotel quarantine costs. And we had some people who did some research as well, and the
Mm-hmm.
feedback we got from their research is that government has actually covered the cost of at least 80% of travelers who have returned and going into hotel quarantine. So yeah.
Exactly. And there has to be a better way. There just simply has to be a better way, because when we look at the state of our community economically, I mean, we have, you know, seniors
Mhm.
who are in need of financial assistance right now. We have
Okay. Looks like we just had a little technical difficulties. Let's see if we can get Keitha back online. Apologies for everyone who's watching. Just bear with us for a few seconds and see if we can get this sorted out.
Continue.
Okay, greetings. Welcome back. Thank
Greetings,
you.
I'm back. I think they called that a technical difficulty, yeah?
Yes, yes, yes.
But in any
You're
case,
welcome.
as my bio brief states, um, I believe in sustainability and equitability for our community as a whole. It cannot be accomplished, achieved in an isolated manner. It cannot be accomplished or achieved in a dominated manner. We are in a situation for quite some time to come where we have to work this thing out together. Not in a fashion that polarizes, isolates, and penalizes. I mean, when I say penalization, I mean within reason. Within reason. Before working together to find solutions. And so the number that you called earlier, some 250,000, possibly more, I don't know. But I know it's a lot of money to be spending out at a time that our seniors are having to choose between medication and lights. Okay? It's not the way to go.
Yeah.
They're having to choose between a doctor's visit and food. Clothing and travel, and the list goes on and on. When I say travel, I'm not talking about frivolous travel, essential travel.
Yeah, essential travel. Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? You have families right now who are trying to determine, how am I going to pay my child's tuition in September?
Yes, right.
Okay, so we as a community have got to come up with better solutions, because economically we are already strapped, and it's already taking a toll as a common norm right now.
Mm-hmm.
We need to place money where it can have its greatest dividends, and that is not in the investment of hotel facilities, if there is a better option.
Right. Well, for a lot of people, and I've had this conversation with a few people, but I remember someone said to me, they said, okay, so you come to the island and someone hasn't had the jab. So you say to them, well, we don't trust you to go home and quarantine on your own, so we need to put you into a mandatory hotel quarantine facility. Mm-hmm. And then you have someone who comes to the island who has had the jab, right? And although the person who hasn't had the jab tests negative on arrival, this person who has had the jab tests positive on arrival, mm-hmm. and they're allowed to go home.
Doesn't make any sense. So which means if they go home,
you can trust someone who's had the jab, but you can't trust someone who hasn't. Exactly. And so that's where people get lost in it.
Yeah.
Because okay, I thought you said you couldn't trust people to quarantine on their own, but so the basis for trust is whether you've had the jab or not. And that's where people are getting lost.
Yes.
In the situation.
Exactly. It defies logic, because that individual arrives at home, they're amidst their peers, their family, and otherwise, what has been put in place, or what is in place to manage that situation?
Right.
I mean, just before I came home, or upon arrival, the numbers were down. And then you see where the numbers are now, mm-hmm. right? 2 weeks later, going on 3 weeks later, you see where the numbers are now. Well, I can tell you for a fact, it wasn't the quarantiners that shut it off.
Well,
we were in the hotel.
Exactly, and that's exactly the thing. And exactly. We've had people looking at that data as well. And to date, our understanding is that we've yet to have anyone in hotel quarantine test positive on their day 13 test.
There you go. There you go. But at the same time, I mean, in our situation, and for those who are listening, anyone from the government and otherwise, it's important for these kinds of exchanges, these types of discussions and forms of communications to be received with open arms, really, because we're not here to badger, really not even here to criticize. We're here to say we've got to find a better way. We have to exchange thoughts, exchange ideas, and consider solutions together. Because the expertise is not always inside the room, Eugene. You
Yes.
know, certainly we have technical officers in place in terms of running the tests and things of that nature. But most individuals who are making decisions in certain portfolios about the topic of COVID are individuals who have no expertise at all in this
Right.
subject. And so, like you and me, the information is being received on a need to know basis and on a first time finding out basis. And then that information has to be put together and regurgitated and delivered to the community as best as it possibly can be. And is it being done well? Is it being done perfect? Absolutely not.
Hmm.
Because the foundation, in terms of where the knowledge and experience is coming from, that's being delivered to us, are people like you and me. They're people like you and me. Yes, they are people who we have elected. Yes, they are people who have been appointed. Yes, they are individuals who, on one day out of 4 or every 5 years, the people step forth and trusted and gifted with a responsibility to serve are not polarized from the same individuals, the same people who placed you there. We're in this together. When a hurricane goes across the island of Bermuda, and we're all preparing, and we're all in fear, and we're all moving in faith, when we emerge from the damage, regardless of how disastrous it is, do we separate ourselves as government and people? No. We go across the island, parish to parish, helping each other resolve and emerge from this situation, the damage and otherwise, as best as we possibly can. And so here we are with a pandemic that, just like a hurricane, is going across our island. We're not in a position to separate, to divide. We're not in that position.
Hmm.
Try bringing a few people who are outside of the room, who are even being kept outside of the room.
Right.
Bring them inside and let's talk and work through this together. We don't need to be criminalizing people through a pandemic. Of course, there are measures where if you are outright violating health and safety measures, absolutely there has to be something in place. But in terms of the penalizations, I believe in some cases we are creating criminals unnecessarily. There's got to be a better way. For some people, um, you know, when they find themselves before the court, that doesn't just become a local record. That becomes an international record.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
It's an indictment on someone's character. It's an indictment on someone's life. It's a it's a indictment on someone's rights because they think differently from the next person. There's got to be a better way for us to learn to exchange with each other. Our government has got to find a better way of not talking at us, but talking with us. The
Yes.
same way that they do when they're canvassing, when they're on the doorstep, asking for that vote. It's a mutual exchange. It's a mutual exchange. And I'm not saying for one moment that every little thing has to be microscoped. I'm saying the most important things, such as communication, humanity, respect, consideration, and inclusion, have to be under the same microscope, working through it together.
Right. Very important.
We
And
can't we can't keep on doing it this way.
right. Right. So we need a shift. We need a shift,
We need
essentially.
we need a huge shift.
Yeah.
When you tell us to be responsible, I'll just roll back a bit for a minute. You're asking me to be responsible and to adhere. and to be honorable in my actions and my words and my truth. But yet you place me and my 8-year-old grandchild in a mold infested hotel that we're still trying to recover from.
Mm.
And it's supposed to be okay. You know, I inquire about why and how, not just for myself, but for the others who will come behind me, because we're in this together. So if I am having challenges breathing and exhaling, it means after my 14 days are up, the next person who comes into that room will have the same problem breathing in and exhaling.
Mm-hmm.
Who made that decision? Who approved that hotel? You know, who was governing placing people in that hotel?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was paid for or whether it was covered, it needs to be healthy and it needs to be safe. Safe.
Well, that's the main thing. We're
I
in a
see. I see
situation.
Jennifer. I just like to say thank Jennifer for her comment. Yes, she says that it would be better if the rules actually made sense. And she's
Mm-hmm.
right. Um, you know, some of those rules, in terms of whether they make sense to some versus others, you know, is a question of individuality. But I think fundamentally she's right. These rules cannot just be put in place throughout different emergency power orders. They have to make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And when they make sense, cooperation across the island is going to be so much easier for our administration to govern and to manage. I don't think
Right.
that the average Bermudian gets up, or for that matter, our average guest worker or visitor gets up and makes a decision of how difficult I'm going to make it be for the government today. Let me just see how much more difficult I can make this today. I don't think that's not how we are, as people are built, which is why we are the community that we are. And so just as you rely on us to make the right decision and to have degrees of discernment when you're asking for a vote, apply the same conscience in this very, very serious matter. Because guess what? The people have to get the government through this, just like the government have to get the people through this. And if
Mm-hmm.
you don't believe me, you know, go on YouTube or go on any number of the online stations and see what's going on in some communities. You know, see how the people are retaliating. See how the people are reacting. See how the people are going beyond the COVID and outright breaking the law,
Right. Right.
right? And be grateful for the kind of community that you've been gifted with to govern.
And that's the thing, right on that point, Keitha, is that I feel like, and this is not just those who have been elected, but also for those of us in the community, you know, I feel like at times we forget the job. The job
Right.
of an elected official is to represent the interests of the
Yes.
people who you elected.
Yeah.
And what I say to people a lot of times is leadership is very challenging. And I don't think anyone would discount, right, the
Mm-hmm.
responsibility or the weight of the responsibility that all leaders have on the normal circumstances.
Yes.
Under circumstances like this is even more challenging. So that's all well understood. But is the job really understood? Many
Yes.
times we hear from leaders and authorities what they think. And what I say to people all the time is, does it really matter what they think?
Mm-hmm.
You know, do we really care what they think? Or is the job for them to represent the way we feel, to
Exactly.
represent our position? Now, the question then comes to the community, and this goes down to every individual. What is our vision collectively?
Mm-hmm.
And individually, what is your vision?
Mm-hmm.
Because what is it that you would like them to represent? And also, as a community, are we holding our leaders accountable?
Right.
So
And
yeah.
important, that's a very important point that you just made there, my friend. Are we fearlessly making them accountable?
Mm,
Because in a community of our size, in any community that has a political structure, are you able to fearlessly hold your leadership accountable?
hmm
Right?
hmm
Going into an election, we are invited to speak our piece on radio shows, forums such as this. We're invited to town hall meetings. We are fiercefully, um, forcefully sometimes um, addressed on our doorstep. What do you need? What do you want? What do you believe that we can do better, or that a government in waiting could do better than the sitting government? We're asked a lot of questions, and our questions, once we answer them, are incorporated into mandates and platforms that are presented on a larger scale, but yet we find ourselves in the belly of the beast, and the same does not apply. When we appoint our officials to govern, you're governing until the next election, which means we are in this together until the next election. It was a team effort, having the honor of being put in place, and it needs to remain a team effort so that we can go through the next 4 or 5 years successfully, safe and sound as possible.
hmm
It cannot be treated like the public are an island or our administration is an island. We're in this together. And individuals and, and entities and organizations and interest groups must be able to speak and convey their thoughts and their feelings, their expression and their solutions safely, without reprimand, without isolation, without polarization,
hmm
right?
hmm
They must feel safe to do so. And
Right.
unfortunately, in this little place called Bermuda, this little island in the sun, this little place called paradise, once called the Isles of Devils, we do not find ourselves in that predicament. Some of the greatest voices of all are the voices that have been silenced, or the voices that remain silenced. Let me tell you why: because they observe and they process and they think. But unless they can safely speak, we are not able to have the benefit of their solutions. We're not able to have the benefit of their solutions. In my field, as you know, my background is communications and strategy. One of the fundamentals is something called groupthink. That's how we put together, our communication audits. This is how we put together our plans, our campaigns, our executions, and our implementations. Inside of all of that, there's something called groupthink, which is how do you manage the mindset of the masses? You have to establish
hmm
where that element of groupthink can be maneuvered and managed. In communications, it's a good thing. But when you're talking about everyday lives, we don't need a groupthink mentality. We don't need a situation where you plant a thought, build a thought, grow a thought, control a thought because of a groupthink mentality. This is a time, and we're in crisis, where we need to know what individuals think and how they feel. And they have to be able to express themselves safely without consequences. People should not be concerned about whether they'll lose their job if they voice their opinion, whether they'll lose a contract if they voice their opinion, whether they'll lose certain opportunities if they voice their opinion, or if they get involved in trying to help to collectively find a solution. People they need to feel safe as the day they casted their vote. That vote is an investment. It's an investment on the well-being of myself, my family, my children, my friends, my community, and frankly, even those who may not necessarily have my best interest at heart. In other words, we always have opponents, but we can oppose and still come together for common ground on other things. But people
Mhm.
must feel safe in their community and not question what the consequence is going to be if I simply participate in thought, in action for the greater good, which is what most of us get up and intend to do on a day-to-day basis.
That's such a wonderful message, Keitha, and I know we can talk for a very long time. It's
Mhm.
a really great having you on the show today. I'm sure those in the audience have appreciated you telling your story and sharing your insights. I'm sure we'll have further conversations
I
about
hope
everything
so.
that's going on. Yeah, but
Yes.
it is very important. I think your message around I guess how we need to work more to bring the country together, to bring people together, to talk more, to communicate, to collaborate, to make sure that we're leveraging our collective skill and expertise, that we're using all the resources that we have
Yes.
available to make the best possible decisions for the benefit of our country and its people. I think that is a very powerful message, and it's something that we can always improve on. And in this situation, it seems like there's a lot of room for improvement in that
Mhm.
regard. So hopefully, for everyone who's watching, you've been inspired in some way.
Mhm.
Let's try to lead more with love. Let's focus more
Yes.
on things that unify us. Let's
Mhm.
let's talk more, even for those of us who have disagreements with family members and friends. Let's make sure that we value what's most important to us in life. And it's really, when it comes down to it, is those relationships. Is our relationship with ourselves.
Mhm.
It's important for us to make sure that we're clear. Is our relationship with our family and our community and our country as a whole. You know what I mean? So let's do that as individuals. And the more we do that as individuals, then the more we can inspire others and influence others to do the same. So again, thank you very much, Keitha, for joining
Exactly.
us on
My
our
pleasure.
community conversations. It's
Yeah.
really been great having you. It's nice catching up with you. It's been a while since we've had the opportunity to talk a lot, and it looks like the audience has really enjoyed. I see some comments here. Dwayne Santucci, thank you for keeping us informed and up to date
Yeah.
at all times. Yeah, appreciate you, Dwayne, for all the work that you're
Yes.
doing, and yeah, we're really loving this. And if you see the message below, we're inviting, if there's anyone who's interested in joining and getting involved with our community conversations, we encourage you, just really send us an email. Someone will reach out to you, and we can line something up so we can have you on. It's very important for us to look at what's going on holistically. We
Mhm.
recognize that this is a health challenge. We recognize that there are economic impacts, and we
Yes.
recognize that there are social impacts as well. And it's very important for us to have conversations about all of that to make sure that no one is left behind. So, Jennifer Drew, thank you also for your comments as well. Yes, we do need
Yes.
to
Hi,
respect
Jennifer.
each other and stop perpetuating the
Thank you,
division.
Jen. Yeah. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you. And for me, I just like to I like to leave our community, our people, our brothers, our sisters across this island, with the word inclusion for the day.
Mhm.
We know the saying, "No man is an island," and certainly we cannot afford to be inside of this pandemic. We have a long way to go, and we have to and will and must travel this road together. We must encourage our government to understand that a difference of opinion doesn't mean an opposition. A difference of opinion simply means that it is time for a meaningful, mutual exchange for the betterment of everyone.
Right. Thank you again. Really appreciate having you on the show, Keith. And thank you, everyone who's joined us today. We look forward to seeing you guys again on our next community conversation. And that's all for today. Peace and love.
Peace and love.